when, Steve, you say things like the idea of fictive kin or all the other various things you talked about, the idea is to create the illusion, the idea is to manipulate the people, whatever it might be, we could recognize various levels of purposefulness in which that's going on. You seem to be coming down on the side of it being powerful individuals, priests, political leaders, shamans, etc., who manipulate other people by using religion. And that certainly makes a very persuasive case. I could very easily imagine that happening. But it's not the only way in which some sort of purposeful agents could be manipulating us. In the case of the snail, manipulated by its parasite to get eaten by a bird, needless to say, the parasite is not intentionally manipulating the snail. Natural selection has favored those parasite genes, those worm genes, which successfully exert phenotypic effect on snail phenotypes in such a way as to improve the survival of worm genotypes, in just the same way as we normally expect genes manipulate their own phenotypes in order to propagate themselves. So this is a non-conscious, non-intentional, direct product of natural selection of genes. The second kind of pseudo-purposeful entity that could be manipulating us is the parasitic ideas themselves. It may not be a shaman or a priest or a king who is manipulating people by exploiting religion and exploiting people's psychological impulse to religion. It may not be that priests are deliberately emulating the cynical car salesman going to ask his boss whether he can give a good deal. It may be that the ideas themselves are favored in a world of other ideas, in an ecosystem of other ideas, that certain kinds of ideas flourish as replicating entities in their own right. And it only superficially looks as though the manipulation is being deliberately done by the human agents. Or finally, as I say, it is the human agents themselves which are doing the manipulation. And even within that, we might subdivide into those cases where the human agents are sort of doing the manipulation. But on the one hand, they might really, in a fully cynical way, like the car salesman, know exactly what they're doing. And probably don't believe in the higher power themselves, but they know that the higher power is very valuable to them politically, and so they're going to pretend to believe in it and they're going to make use of it. That's the cynical end of the continuum. The other end of the continuum, the priests and shamans may sincerely believe in it, and yet still at some level may be exploiting it in ways that they at least half know is to their own self-interest. And I could imagine a continuum between those. So I suppose what I've done is erect a rather complicated set of continua within a continuum where we go from gene selection, meme selection, group selection, if you agree with it, and then we go to human manipulation, which varies within itself from the extremely cynical to the only slightly cynical. And I would welcome from Steve some further discussion of where he thinks the truth lies along that continuum.
I agree. It's an extremely interesting issue, and one that the empirical anthropologists who study religion ought to put to an empirical test in terms of the degree to which religious leaders worldwide, including in tribal societies, are sincere in their beliefs or are cynical in them. And it may be that there is that they may be sincere at the level of their own intentionality, but cynical at the level of evolutionary intentionality, namely that sincerity can be a very good way to trick people. I think it was Groucho Marx said, the most important trait to get ahead is sincerity. If you can fake that, then you've got it made. And for reasons, actually, again, I'll go back to The Selfish Gene, but in the preface to The Selfish Gene by Robert Trivers, probably one of the most important prefaces in the history of publishing, Bob Trivers outlined in I think 2 sentences, the theory of self-deception, which social psychologists have put to such good use, namely that in a evolutionary arms race in which there is an advantage to deceiving and an advantage to detecting deception, the best deceiver will be the one who, in a sense, believes his own lies. The better not to give away the awful truth through self-contradiction or a nervous tic or sweating and so on. And this is, I think, well known in human negotiation as documented by social psychologists. And it might be a reason that, at least in their own minds, many of the leaders are not, in fact, cynical, but they believe it themselves, and it wouldn't work nearly as well if they were cynical, because that cynicism would itself be detectable. But also, again, this is, I don't mean to suggest these as answers, because they're really more hypotheses that it would be interesting to test. It may even be true that this kind of group-wise self-deception can arise even if there isn't any one leader who benefits. And I think we both agree that the religious situation that we're most familiar with, the Abrahamic religions, with the single all-powerful deity and the political/religious hierarchy, is not universal in religious beliefs. That there are also pantheistic beliefs and cases in which there isn't necessarily a religious authority, some pope or high priest. But there still might be a dynamic in which all the members of the group, it's in the interests of all the members of the group for some belief to be held by all the other members of the group. As in a public goods or prisoner's dilemma situation, everyone can benefit if everyone makes some sacrifice to the group, but many people would lose if some subset of people fail to contribute but got the benefits. I mean, and this is most dramatic in the case of war. If the entire platoon or brigade has solidarity and they all fight together, then they can, in many cases, succeed over an enemy. But each member has to worry that if some of the others start to defect, he would be a sucker for staying in too long, and which is, of course, why defection in a military context is so instantly and severely punished, because the whole coalition can unravel if a few members start to, because then everyone else is a sitting duck or is a sucker for going along. And so in cases where there is an advantage to the individuals of the group acting together, if everyone's simultaneously agreeing to sacrifice for the good of the group, which then redounds to the good of the individuals, each person might see it in his interest to have this belief in the formidability and solidarity of the group be avowed by everyone else. And if there is a coordination problem to which religious ceremonies might be a kind of solution, namely to set up the situation in which your brethren, as they say, are unlikely to defect, and as part of the bargain, you allow yourself to be manipulated so that you're not tempted to defect. But as long as this, in a sense, it's a manipulation of everyone agreeing to manipulate everyone else and themselves simultaneously, can be a way of enjoying the benefits to the individual of group membership and protecting it against the danger of unraveling, even if it isn't one superior authority who, by enforcing these myths and rituals, benefits at the expense of the group members.
I mean, I think Axelrod's book, which sort of started out a lot of this thinking, the sort of thing you're talking about, he has a chapter on how to set up societies or set up groups in such a way as to maximize cooperation. And once again, and that's sort of what you're talking about now, you're setting up a military organization in such a way as to maximize, so every individual can maximize their benefit. But